Have you ever watched someone crush your child's spirit right before your eyes and felt completely powerless to stop it? I'm Sarah Martinez, a single mom of 2 from Phoenix, Arizona, and what happened at the Desert Springs Art Festival last October still gives me chills. My 9-year-old son Jake had been working on his drawings all summer, dreaming of the day he could show them to the world. What started as his biggest artistic dream turned into a nightmare of public humiliation, until one moment changed everything and taught us both what true vision really means. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun was already blazing hot even at 8 a.m., typical for Phoenix in October when the desert finally starts to cool down from the summer inferno. I was rushing around our small apartment, trying to find Jake's art supplies while simultaneously packing snacks and water bottles for what I hoped would be a special day. My daughter Emma, only 6 years old, was spinning around the living room in her favorite purple dress, completely oblivious to the nervous energy radiating from both Jake and me. Jake sat at our kitchen table, carefully placing his drawings into a worn leather portfolio that had belonged to my father. Each piece was protected by a sheet of tissue paper, handled with the reverence most people reserve for precious family, heirlooms. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he worked, a habit he'd inherited from me along with his stubborn streak and his tendency to see the world through an artist's eyes. I watched him arrange his work with such care and felt that familiar mix of pride and worry that comes with being a parent. Jake wasn't like other kids his age. Where they saw a homeless man on the street corner, Jake saw weathered hands that told stories of hard work and disappointment. Where they saw our elderly neighbor Mrs. Chen tending her garden, Jake saw the gentle curve of her spine and the way afternoon light caught the silver in her hair. His drawings reflected this unique perspective. They weren't technically perfect, by traditional standards, but they captured something deeper, something most adults had forgotten how to see. His portraits had an emotional honesty that sometimes took my breath away. When he drew me, exhausted after a double shift at the hospital where I work as a nurse, he somehow managed to show both my tiredness and my love for him and Emma. It was unsettling and beautiful at the same time. The Desert Springs Art Festival had been Jake's dream for months. He'd seen the advertisement in the local paper back in July, a small notice about their youth showcase where children could display their artwork alongside professional artists. The entry fee was modest, but for our tight budget, it represented a significant investment. I'd picked up extra shifts to make it happen because I believed in Jake's talent, even when others didn't understand it. My mother had been less than supportive when I told her about our plans. She'd made it clear she thought I was setting Jake up for disappointment, that his drawings were nice for a child, but hardly worthy of a real art festival. My ex-husband David had been even more dismissive during his weekly phone call with the kids, suggesting that maybe Jake should focus on more practical pursuits like sports or academics instead of wasting time on fantasy. But I'd seen something in Jake's work that they couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. There was a depth there, an emotional intelligence that transcended technical skill. When he drew our neighbor Mr. Rodriguez, who'd lost his job and was struggling to keep his family afloat, Jake somehow captured both the man's dignity and his quiet desperation. When he sketched Emma sleeping, he showed not just her peaceful expression, but the trust and innocence that made her so precious to me. The drive to the festival took us through downtown Phoenix, past the glass towers and into the historic arts district where the event was being held. Roosevelt Row had been transformed for the weekend, with white tents lining the streets and colorful banners fluttering in the desert breeze. Food trucks were already setting up, filling the air with the scent of breakfast burritos and fresh coffee. Emma pressed her face against the car window, excited by all the activity. She'd been Jake's biggest supporter throughout his artistic journey, often sitting beside him while he drew, asking questions about his color choices and listening intently to his explanations about why he made certain artistic decisions. At 6 years old, she already understood that her brother saw the world differently, and she thought that made him special rather than strange. Jake was quiet during the drive, clutching his portfolio and staring out at the passing scenery. I could tell he was nervous, probably wondering if his work would measure up to what other kids had created. I wanted to reassure him, to tell him that his art was beautiful and meaningful, but I also knew that he needed to find his own confidence. My words of encouragement, while heartfelt, couldn't shield him from the judgment of strangers. We arrived at the festival just as the vendors were finishing their setup. The youth showcase was located in a prominent spot near the main entrance, with child-sized easels and display boards arranged in neat rows. Some parents were already there, hanging elaborate presentations of their children's work. Professional, frames, printed artist statements, even small spotlights to highlight certain pieces. I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach as I realized how unprepared we were by comparison. Jake's work was beautiful, but it was also simple in its presentation. We'd matted a few pieces using supplies from the craft store, but most of his drawings were still in their original form, created on regular sketch paper with colored pencils and occasionally watercolor paints. Standing there among the sophisticated displays, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake in encouraging him to participate. But Jake was already walking toward the registration table, his confidence seemingly unshaken by the elaborate setups around us. He approached the volunteer coordinator, a cheerful woman named Linda, who helped him find his assigned space and explained how the judging would work. Professional artists and gallery owners would walk through the showcase throughout the day, and at the end, awards would be given in various categories. As Jake began setting up his display, I noticed other parents watching us with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. One woman in particular caught my attention. Monica Sullivan was someone I recognized from Jake's school, a real estate agent who always seemed to be organizing fundraisers or volunteering for high-profile committees. Her son Marcus was in Jake's class, and she'd brought him to display what looked like a technically impressive landscape painting. Monica approached us with the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. She was impeccably dressed despite the early hour, with perfectly styled blonde hair and jewelry that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her presence made me suddenly conscious of my own appearance, my hair hastily pulled back and my clothes chosen for comfort rather than style. She examined Jake's display with the air of someone conducting an inspection rather than admiring art. Her eyes lingered on his drawing of homeless veteran Jerry, who often sat outside the grocery store where we shopped. Jake had captured something profound in the man's expression, a combination of weariness and hope that spoke to his essential humanity despite his circumstances. Monica's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, her smile becoming more strained. She turned to her friend, another school parent named Patricia, whose daughter was also participating in the showcase. Their conversation was conducted in stage whispers, clearly intended for us to overhear. The criticism began subtly, with comments about artistic technique and proper training. Monica mentioned that Marcus had been taking private lessons for 2 years with a professional instructor, while Patricia noted that her daughter attended a specialized art camp every summer. Their words were carefully chosen to sound educational rather than cruel, but the underlying message was clear. Amateur work had no place among serious young artists. Jake continued arranging his pieces, but I could see his enthusiasm beginning to waver. His movements became more hesitant, and he kept glancing at the more elaborate displays around us. I wanted to intervene, to tell those women to keep their opinions to themselves, but I found myself paralyzed by the same insecurity that had plagued me since childhood. This pattern of self-doubt wasn't new for me. Growing up as the daughter of immigrant parents who valued practical careers over artistic pursuits, I'd learned early to keep my own creative impulses hidden. My father had worked construction while my mother cleaned office buildings, both of them sacrificing their own dreams to provide stability for our family. Art was a luxury we couldn't afford, both financially and emotionally. When Jake showed artistic talent from an early age, I'd been torn between encouragement and fear. I wanted him to pursue his passion, but I also worried about setting him up for disappointment in a world that often devalues creativity. My own parents had been skeptical of my decision to support his artistic interests, suggesting that I should focus on more practical skills that would guarantee future employment. But watching Jake work on his drawings over the summer, seeing the joy and focus in his expression, I'd realized that artistic expression wasn't just a hobby for him. It was how he made sense of the world, how he processed emotions and experiences that were too complex for words. His art was an essential part of who he was, and suppressing it would have been like asking him to stop breathing. As more parents and children arrived at the showcase, the implicit competition became more obvious. Kids were presenting work that looked almost professional in its execution, accompanied by artist statements and biographical information that read like gallery exhibition materials. Some parents were clearly more invested in winning than their children were, hovering anxiously and making last-minute adjustments to displays. Jake finished setting up his modest presentation and stepped back to survey his work. His three main pieces were arranged simply on the provided easel: the portrait of Jerry, a drawing of Mrs. Chen in her garden, and a sketch of Emma reading a book in the golden light of late afternoon. Each piece told a story, capturing not just physical appearance, but emotional truth. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The portrait of Jerry was perhaps the most powerful. Jake had drawn him not as a stereotype of homelessness, but as a complex individual with dignity and depth. The lines around Jerry's eyes spoke of laughter and sorrow, while his posture suggested both defeat and resilience. Jake had somehow managed to see past the surface circumstances to the essential humanity underneath. His drawing of Mrs. Chen showed similar insight. Rather than focusing on her age or frailty, Jake had captured her nurturing spirit and the gentle wisdom in her expression. The way he'd rendered the plants around her suggested growth and renewal, as if her garden was an extension of her caring nature. The sketch of Emma was perhaps the most technically simple but emotionally resonant. Jake had drawn her in profile, absorbed in her book, with afternoon sunlight streaming through our apartment window. The drawing captured not just her physical appearance, but the sense of peace and wonder that reading brought her, the way she could disappear completely into stories and emerge transformed. Monica and Patricia were joined by other parents, who seemed to form an impromptu judging panel of their own. Their comments became more pointed as they examined Jake's work, with suggestions that perhaps he needed more structured training or guidance in proper artistic techniques. One father, whose son had created an elaborate still life of fruit, mentioned that children needed to master the basics before attempting to express personal vision. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger, but I remained silent. Part of me knew they were wrong, that they were missing something important about Jake's work, but another part wondered if they might be right. Maybe I had been naive to think his drawings were special. Maybe I was just a proud mother seeing talent where none existed. Jake's confidence was clearly shaken by the growing criticism. He kept adjusting his drawings, as if better positioning might somehow make them more acceptable to the adults who were discussing his work with such dismissive authority. His shoulders hunched forward in a defensive posture I recognized from my own childhood, when criticism felt like physical blows. The morning continued with more families arriving and more elaborate displays being unveiled. Some children had brought entire portfolios of work, complete with professional photography and detailed explanations of their artistic process. Others had created multimedia presentations that included not just visual art, but written statements about their inspiration and methodology. In the midst of this increasingly competitive atmosphere, Jake's simple presentation looked even more modest. His drawings were beautiful to me, full of life and emotional truth, but they seemed to pale beside the technical sophistication of some other entries. I began to question my judgment, wondering if I'd been wrong to encourage him to participate in something so clearly beyond his current skill level. But then I watched Jake interact with a younger child who was struggling to hang her drawing properly. Without being asked, he stepped over to help, showing her how to position the piece to catch the light and offering genuine encouragement about her color choices. His kindness and generosity of spirit reminded me why I'd been so proud of him in the first place. This was who Jake was at his core, someone who saw beauty and value in others, who approached the world with empathy rather than judgment. His art reflected this essential quality, capturing not just surface appearances but deeper truths about the human experience. Whether or not the judges recognized this talent, I knew it was real and precious. As the official judging began, professional artists and gallery owners started walking through the showcase, stopping at various displays to examine the work more closely. Some spent considerable time at the more elaborate presentations, asking questions about technique and training. Others moved quickly past simpler displays, seeming to make snap judgments based on initial impressions. Jake stood beside his easel, ready to answer questions about his work if anyone showed interest. His nervousness was visible in the way he shifted his weight from foot to foot and fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. But his love for his art was evident in his expression when anyone paused to look at his drawings. I positioned myself nearby, close enough to offer support if needed, but far enough away to let him handle the interactions independently. Emma had found a friend among the other siblings and was playing nearby, occasionally running over to tell Jake how proud she was of his drawings. Her unconditional support seemed to bolster his confidence, reminding him that at least some people appreciated his unique vision. The first few judges passed by Jake's display with barely a glance, their attention caught by more technically impressive work. Each dismissal felt like a small blow, not just to Jake, but to me as his mother. I'd invested so much hope in this day, believing it would be an opportunity for others to see what I saw in his art. But then something remarkable happened that would change everything and teach us both a lesson about the difference between skill and vision, between following rules and telling truth. An older woman with silver hair and paint-stained fingers approached Jake's easel, and her expression as she examined his work was completely different from the casual dismissal we'd experienced so far. Her name was Dr. Elena Vasquez, and she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades in the art world. She wore a flowing turquoise scarf that complemented her silver jewelry, and her hands moved with the practiced grace of someone who understood the language. A visual expression. Unlike the other judges who had hurried past Jake's display, she paused deliberately, her dark eyes studying each piece with genuine interest. What struck me immediately about Dr. Vasquez was how she approached Jake's work. She didn't look at his drawings with the casual dismissal we'd grown accustomed to, nor did she seem to be checking boxes on some invisible rubric of technical proficiency. Instead, she stood quietly before each piece, allowing herself time to truly see what Jake had created. Her silence felt different from the others, not dismissive but contemplative, as if she was having a conversation with the artwork itself. She spent several minutes examining the portrait of Jerry, tilting her head slightly as she studied the way Jake had captured the complex emotions in the homeless veteran's expression. I watched her face carefully, trying to read her reaction, but her expression remained professionally neutral. She moved to the drawing of Mrs. Chen, and I noticed how her shoulders relaxed slightly, as if something in Jake's gentle portrayal of our elderly neighbor had touched her on a personal level. Jake stood beside his easel, more nervous than I'd seen him all morning. His hands were clasped behind his back, and he kept shifting his weight from one foot to the other, clearly uncertain about how to interpret this extended examination of his work. I wanted to step closer, to offer him some reassurance, but something told me this was a moment he needed to navigate on his own. Dr. Vasquez finally turned her attention to Jake himself, and her expression softened with genuine warmth. She had the kind of face that suggested a lifetime of both challenges and joy, with laugh lines around her eyes and a mouth that seemed more accustomed to smiling than frowning. When she spoke, Her voice carried a slight accent that I couldn't immediately place, but it lent her words a musical quality that was both soothing and authoritative. She asked Jake about his artistic process, but not in the mechanical way that some of the earlier judges had questioned other children. Instead, she seemed genuinely curious about what motivated him to create, what he saw when he looked at his subjects, and how he decided what elements to emphasize in his drawings. Jake responded hesitantly at first, but as Dr. Vasquez continued to ask thoughtful questions, his confidence began to return. He explained how he'd met Jerry outside the grocery store, how they'd started talking about Jerry's service in the military and his struggles since returning home. Jake described the way Jerry's eyes lit up when he talked about his daughter, whom he hadn't seen in years, and how that mixture of love and loss had inspired the expression Jake tried to capture in his portrait. Dr. Vasquez nodded thoughtfully, asking follow-up questions that showed she understood the emotional complexity Jake had been attempting to convey. When Jake talked about Mrs. Chen, his enthusiasm became more evident. He described how she'd taught him about the different plants in her garden, how each one required different care and attention, and how he'd tried to show that nurturing quality in her face and posture. Dr. Vasquez smiled at this explanation, mentioning that she could see the connection between the careful attention Mrs. Chen gave her plants and the careful attention Jake had given to observing and portraying her character. The conversation continued for nearly 20 minutes, during which time I noticed other parents and children beginning to gather nearby, curious about why one judge was spending so much time at Jake's modest display. Monica and Patricia had positioned themselves close enough to overhear, their expressions shifting from dismissive amusement to something approaching concern as they realized that Dr. Vasquez was taking Jake's work seriously. What impressed me most about Dr. Vasquez was how she spoke to Jake as an equal, as one artist to another, rather than condescending to him as a child. She asked about his color choices, his composition decisions, and his emotional motivations with the same respect she might have shown to an adult artist. Jake responded to this respect by opening up about his artistic vision in ways I'd never heard him articulate before. He explained how he chose colors based on feelings rather than strict realism, how the purple shadows in Jerry's portrait were meant to convey sadness, while the golden highlights suggested hope. He described how he'd positioned Mrs. Chen among her plants to show how she was part of the garden's growth and renewal. These weren't concepts I'd ever heard him discuss explicitly, but it was clear that his artistic choices were far more intentional than anyone had given him credit for. Dr. Vasquez's questions revealed that she was not just any judge, but someone with serious credentials in the art world. Through their conversation, I learned that she was a professor emeritus from Arizona State University's art department, a practicing artist whose work had been exhibited internationally, and the former director of a prestigious gallery in Scottsdale. Her opinion carried weight that went far beyond the context of a local art fair. As their discussion continued, I began to see Jake's work through new eyes. Dr. Vasquez's questions highlighted aspects of his drawings that I'd sensed but hadn't been able to articulate. She pointed out how his composition choices created emotional intimacy with his subjects, how his unconventional color palette enhanced rather than detracted from the emotional truth of his portraits, and how his ability to capture personality and inner life distinguished his work from technically proficient but emotionally empty art. The gathering crowd included not just curious parents and children, but several other judges who had been drawn by the extended conversation. I noticed them exchanging glances and whispered comments, clearly intrigued by Dr. Vasquez's obvious interest in Jake's work. Some of the parents who had been dismissive earlier were now studying Jake's drawings more carefully, as if trying to see what they might have missed. Jake was gaining confidence with each question, his responses becoming more detailed and animated. He talked about how drawing helped him understand people better, how it forced him to really look at someone and think about their experiences and emotions. He mentioned that he liked drawing people who seemed sad or lonely because he thought everyone deserved to be seen and remembered, especially those whom others might overlook or dismiss. Dr. Vasquez's reaction to this last comment was particularly striking. Her eyes widened slightly, and she nodded with what appeared to be deep approval. She mentioned that throughout art history, the greatest artists had been those who used their work to bear witness to human experience, especially the experiences of those who might otherwise be invisible to society. She said that Jake's instinct to see and portray the full humanity of his subjects showed an artistic maturity that was remarkable for someone his age. The extended conversation was creating a scene that was impossible to ignore. Other displays that had initially attracted more attention were now being abandoned as people gathered around Jake's modest easel. Monica and Patricia were whispering urgently to each other, clearly disturbed by this unexpected turn of events. Their children, Marcus and his friend, looked confused by the sudden shift in attention away from their more elaborate presentations. What struck me most about this interaction was how it was changing not just Jake's confidence, but my own perception of his abilities. Hearing Dr. Vasquez articulate the sophisticated artistic concepts that Jake was intuitively employing made me realize that his work was far more accomplished than I'd understood. Her professional validation was confirming what I'd felt in my heart, but had begun to doubt under the pressure of others' criticism. Dr. Vasquez asked Jake if he had other work with him, and he eagerly opened his portfolio to show her additional drawings. She examined each one with the same careful attention, commenting on his consistent ability to capture emotional truth and his developing sense of composition and color. She mentioned that his work reminded her of some of the great humanist artists, painters, and illustrators who had used their skills to document and dignify human experience. As the crowd around Jake's display continued to grow, I noticed the other judges beginning to take notice. What had started as one professor's interest in an overlooked young artist was becoming a significant moment in the festival. People were pulling out their phones to take pictures, not just of Jake's artwork, but of the unprecedented attention it was receiving from such a distinguished member of the art community. The shift in atmosphere was palpable. Parents who had been focused on their own children's displays were now craning their necks to see what all the commotion was about. Children were asking their parents why everyone was looking at Jake's drawings, forcing adults to actually examine work they had previously dismissed without serious consideration. Jake was handling the attention with a combination of excitement and bewilderment. He clearly understood that something significant was happening, but I don't think he fully grasped the magnitude of Dr. Vasquez's endorsement. To him, she was simply an adult who understood and appreciated his art, who asked good questions and seemed genuinely interested in his responses. The broader implications of having such a respected figure in the art world champion his work would become clear only later. Dr. Vasquez's interest in Jake's work was attracting attention from festival organizers as well. I noticed several people with official badges and clipboards gathering nearby, clearly trying to understand what was causing such a stir at what had initially appeared to be a minor display in the youth showcase. Their presence added another layer of significance to the moment, suggesting that Jake's work was being recognized not just by one judge, but by the festival's leadership. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Jake's simple presentation, which had seemed so inadequate compared to the elaborate displays around it, was now the center of attention at the entire festival. His drawings, created with basic materials and presented without professional framing or fancy lighting, were drawing more genuine interest than work that had been produced with expensive lessons and sophisticated presentation techniques. Monica's expression had transformed from smugness to obvious discomfort. She kept glancing between Jake's growing audience and her son Marcus, who was standing beside his technically proficient but emotionally sterile landscape painting with increasing bewilderment. The validation she had expected for her investment in private lessons and professional materials wasn't materializing, while the work she had dismissed was receiving unprecedented recognition. Dr. Vasquez's questions were becoming more specific and technical, exploring Jake's understanding of artistic concepts that most 9-year-olds wouldn't even know existed. Yet Jake was able to respond thoughtfully, not because he had been formally taught these concepts, but because he intuitively understood them through his practice and observation. His natural artistic intelligence was becoming evident to everyone within earshot. As the morning progressed, what had started as a simple art fair judging process was evolving into something much more significant. Dr. Vasquez's recognition of Jake's talent was attracting attention from other art professionals who happened to be at the festival. Gallery owners, art teachers, and established artists were joining the crowd around Jake's display, drawn by curiosity about what could be generating such intense interest from someone of Dr. Vasquez's stature. The validation Jake was receiving was profound, not just because it came from a respected authority, but because it was so clearly genuine. Dr. Vasquez wasn't offering polite encouragement or patronizing praise. She was engaging with his work as seriously as she would with any artist's, recognizing qualities that elevated it above simple child's play into the realm of legitimate artistic expression. But even as I felt overwhelming pride in Jake's recognition, I was acutely aware that we were building toward a moment that would test not just his artistic abilities but his character. The attention he was receiving was bound to provoke reactions from those who had been so quick to dismiss his work, and I wondered how he would handle both the validation and the inevitable backlash that might follow. The scene that was unfolding around Jake's display was unprecedented in my experience. Never before had I witnessed such a dramatic reversal of expectations, such a complete overturning of initial judgments. What had begun as a potential humiliation was transforming into a moment of triumph. But I sensed that the most challenging part of this experience was still to come. Dr. Vasquez's interest in Jake's work was clearly building towards something more significant than simple encouragement. Her questions were becoming more pointed, her examination of his drawings more thorough, and her comments more specific about their artistic merits. I had the distinct impression that she was preparing to make some kind of offer or proposal, something that would take this interaction beyond the realm of festival judging into something with more lasting implications. The crowd around us continued to grow, and I could feel the energy shifting from casual curiosity to genuine excitement. People were beginning to realize that they were witnessing something special, a moment of artistic recognition that transcended the usual parameters of a local art fair. Jake's simple drawings were being elevated to a level of significance that no one, least of all Jake himself, had anticipated when we arrived that morning. As Dr. Vasquez continued her examination and discussion of Jake's work, I found myself thinking about all the doubts and criticisms we had encountered, not just that morning, but throughout Jake's young artistic journey. The dismissive comments from family members, the skeptical reactions from other parents, the suggestions that his time might be better spent on more practical pursuits, all of it seemed suddenly irrelevant in the face of this professional validation. But I also knew that this moment, as wonderful as it was, represented just the beginning of a new phase in Jake's artistic development. Dr. Vasquez's recognition was opening doors that we hadn't even known existed, creating opportunities and challenges that would require careful navigation. The responsibility of nurturing Jake's talent while protecting his childhood was becoming more complex with each passing minute of this extraordinary morning. The festival around us seemed to fade into the background as Dr. Vasquez prepared to make what I sensed would be a life-changing proposal. The elaborate displays that had initially intimidated us, the judgmental parents who had questioned Jake's abilities, even the festival awards that had seemed so important just hours earlier, all of it was becoming secondary to this moment of genuine artistic recognition and the possibilities it might create for Jake's future. The transformation in the festival atmosphere was becoming impossible to ignore. What had started as polite curiosity about Dr. Vasquez's extended conversation with Jake was evolving into something approaching a spectacle. Parents who had been focused on their own children's displays were abandoning their posts to see what could possibly be generating such sustained interest from someone of her obvious authority and expertise. Monica Sullivan's carefully maintained composure was beginning to crack. I watched her face cycle through a series of expressions, from confusion to irritation to something approaching panic as she realized that the child she had dismissed so casually was receiving the kind of serious attention she had hoped would be directed toward her son, Marcus. Her investment in private art lessons, expensive materials, and professional presentation was being overshadowed by Jake's simple drawings on regular paper. Patricia joined Monica at the edge of the growing crowd, both women straining to hear Dr. Vasquez's comments about Jake's work. Their whispered conversation was becoming more agitated as they watched their carefully planned strategy for festival success unravel before their eyes. Other parents who had participated in the earlier dismissal of Jake's artwork were now shifting uncomfortably, perhaps beginning to question their own judgment or worry about how their previous comments might be perceived. Jake remained remarkably composed throughout this dramatic shift in attention. While I was acutely aware of every new person joining the crowd around his display, every camera phone being raised to capture the scene, every whispered comment about the unexpected turn of events, he seemed focused entirely on his conversation with Dr. Vasquez. His ability to maintain his concentration in the midst of such scrutiny impressed me almost as much as his artistic talent. Dr. Vasquez's questions were becoming increasingly sophisticated, exploring aspects of artistic theory and practice that I wouldn't have expected a 9-year-old to understand. Yet Jake continued to respond thoughtfully, demonstrating an intuitive grasp of concepts that many adult artists struggle to articulate. His explanations of his color choices, his compositional decisions, and his emotional motivations revealed a level of artistic sophistication that was clearly surprising even to Dr. Vasquez. The portrait of Jerry was receiving particular attention from Dr. Vasquez and the other art professionals who had joined the discussion. They were examining Jake's use of color to convey emotion, his ability to capture psychological depth in his subject's expression, and his skill in creating intimacy between the viewer and the portrayed individual. These were not qualities typically associated with children's artwork, and their presence in Jake's drawing was generating serious discussion about his potential as an artist. Emma had abandoned her playmates to stand beside me, sensing that something significant was happening even if she couldn't fully understand its implications. She watched the crowd gathering around her brother with a mixture of pride and confusion, clearly pleased that people were finally recognizing what she had always known about Jake's special abilities, but uncertain about why it was creating such a commotion. The festival organizers were now openly involved in the situation developing around Jake's display. I noticed several official badges and clipboards in the crowd, suggesting that the festival's leadership was taking notice of the unprecedented attention being generated by one young artist's work. Their presence added another layer of significance to the moment, indicating that Jake's recognition was extending beyond individual appreciation to institutional acknowledgement. Dr. Vasquez's examination of Jake's portfolio was revealing additional layers of his artistic development. Each drawing demonstrated consistent themes in his work, a coherent artistic vision that focused on capturing the dignity and complexity of human experience. His subjects ranged from homeless individuals to elderly neighbors to family members, but all were portrayed with the same respectful attention to their essential humanity. One drawing that received particular attention showed our mailman, Roberto, during his daily rounds through our neighborhood. Jake had captured him not just as a uniformed postal worker, but as an individual with his own personality and presence. The way Jake had rendered Roberto's expression suggested both the routine nature of his work and his genuine care for the people he served. Dr. Vasquez commented on how this drawing demonstrated Jake's ability to find meaning and dignity in everyday encounters. Another piece that generated discussion was Jake's sketch of a young mother with her baby at the bus stop near our apartment. Jake had somehow managed to capture both the exhaustion and the fierce protective love in the woman's posture and expression. Dr. Vasquez noted how this drawing showed Jake's empathy extending across age groups and circumstances, his ability to recognize and portray universal human experiences regardless of the specific context. The technical aspects of Jake's work were also receiving serious analysis. Dr. Vasquez pointed out his intuitive understanding of proportion, his effective use of negative space, and his ability to create depth and dimension with simple line work. These were sophisticated artistic concepts that Jake was employing naturally, without formal training or conscious awareness of their theoretical foundations. Marcus Sullivan was standing beside his own display, watching the attention focused on Jake with obvious bewilderment. His landscape painting was technically competent, demonstrating the skills he had learned through private lessons and structured instruction. But it lacked the emotional resonance and personal vision that made Jake's work so compelling. The difference between trained technique and authentic artistic voice was becoming starkly apparent to everyone present. Monica's reaction to her son's confusion was painful to witness. She had invested significant time and money in Marcus's artistic education, expecting that professional instruction would guarantee success at events like this festival. The realization that technical proficiency alone was insufficient for genuine artistic achievement was clearly challenging her assumptions about talent, training, and recognition. Dr. Vasquez's discussion with Jake was attracting attention from local media representatives who happened to be covering the festival. I noticed a photographer from the community newspaper positioning himself to capture images of the interaction, and a blogger who covered local arts events was taking notes on her phone. The story of a young artist receiving such serious recognition was apparently newsworthy enough to warrant documentation. The irony of the situation was becoming more pronounced with each passing minute. Jake's simple presentation, which had seemed so inadequate when compared to the elaborate displays around it, was now the center of the most significant attention at the entire festival. His basic materials and modest framing were being overshadowed by the power and authenticity of his artistic vision. Other young artists at the festival were beginning to gather around Jake's display as well, drawn by curiosity about what was generating such adult interest. Some seemed inspired by seeing a peer receive such serious recognition, while others appeared confused or even envious about the attention focused on work that didn't conform to their expectations of successful art. Jake's responses to Dr. Vasquez's questions were revealing aspects of his personality that I hadn't fully appreciated before. His thoughtfulness about his subjects, his consideration of their feelings and circumstances, and his desire to portray them with dignity and respect showed a level of emotional maturity that was remarkable for his age. These qualities were clearly contributing to the power of his artwork and the strong reaction it was generating. The growing crowd was creating logistical challenges for the festival organizers. The area around Jake's display was becoming congested as more people tried to see what was causing such excitement. Other displays were being neglected as attention focused on this unexpected center of activity, potentially affecting the fair experience for other participants. Dr. Vasquez's interest in Jake's work was clearly building toward some kind of concrete proposal. Her questions were becoming more specific about his artistic goals, his interest in further development, and his family's support for his artistic pursuits. I sensed that she was preparing to offer some form of mentorship or opportunity that would extend beyond the context of the festival. The validation Jake was receiving was profound in its implications for his future artistic development. Recognition from someone of Dr. Vasquez's stature and experience would open doors that we hadn't even known existed, but it also carried responsibilities and expectations that would need to be carefully managed to protect Jake's natural development and childhood experience. Monica and Patricia's whispered conversation was becoming more animated as they watched, their assumptions about artistic success being challenged. Their strategy of investing in professional presentation and technical training was proving insufficient when compared to authentic artistic vision and emotional truth. The lesson was clear, but accepting it required acknowledging that their previous judgments had been fundamentally flawed. The festival judges, who had initially passed by Jake's display with barely a glance, were now returning to examine his work more carefully. Dr. Vasquez's obvious interest had prompted them to reconsider their initial assessments, raising questions about their own evaluation criteria and artistic judgment. The situation was creating a moment of professional reflection that extended beyond Jake's individual recognition. Jake's ability to maintain his focus and composure throughout this extraordinary attention was demonstrating qualities that went beyond artistic talent. His poise under pressure, his thoughtful responses to sophisticated questions, and his genuine engagement with the discussion showed a maturity and confidence that would serve him well in any future artistic endeavors. The crowd around Jake's display now included art teachers from local schools, gallery representatives, and established artists who had been drawn by word of the remarkable young talent being discussed. The networking opportunities that were spontaneously developing could have significant implications for Jake's artistic education and career development. Dr. Vasquez's examination of Jake's work was also revealing insights about the nature of artistic talent and development. Her comments suggested that authentic artistic vision often emerges naturally in individuals with the right combination of sensitivity, observation skills, and creative drive. Jake's lack of formal training wasn't hindering his artistic development, but might actually be protecting his natural voice from premature academic influence. The emotional impact of watching Jake receive such serious recognition was overwhelming. After months of subtle criticism and doubt from family members and other parents, seeing his talent validated by someone of Dr. Vasquez's credentials felt like vindication of every instinct I'd had about his abilities. The investment in art supplies, the encouragement of his creative pursuits, and the decision to enter the festival were all being justified in ways I could never have anticipated. Emma's pride in her brother was evident in her posture and expression as she watched the crowd gathered around his display. Her unwavering support throughout his artistic journey was receiving its own form of validation as she witnessed others finally recognizing what she had always seen in Jake's work. Her confidence in her brother's abilities had never wavered, even when adult opinions suggested otherwise. The festival atmosphere had been completely transformed by the attention focused on Jake's display. What had begun as a routine community art fair was evolving into a significant moment of artistic discovery. The recognition of genuine talent in an unexpected place was creating excitement that went far beyond the usual pleasantries of local cultural events. Dr. Vasquez's interest in Jake's work was clearly approaching some kind of culmination. Her questions were becoming more specific about practical matters, suggesting that she was preparing to make a concrete offer or proposal. The anticipation in the crowd was palpable as people sensed that they were witnessing the beginning of something significant in a young artist's development. The lesson implicit in Jake's recognition was challenging assumptions about artistic development, talent recognition, and the value of authentic expression versus technical training. His success was demonstrating that genuine artistic vision could emerge naturally in the right circumstances, without extensive formal instruction or expensive presentation methods. Monica's obvious discomfort with the situation was creating its own subplot within the larger drama of Jake's recognition. Her son Marcus was clearly confused by the attention focused on work that didn't match his understanding of successful art, forcing her to confront the possibility that her approach to nurturing artistic talent might have been misguided. The media attention that Jake's recognition was generating would likely extend the impact of this moment beyond the immediate festival context. Documentation of his story could inspire other young artists and challenge conventional assumptions about how artistic talent should be identified and nurtured in children. As Dr. Vasquez prepared to make what seemed like an important announcement about Jake's work, the entire festival seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The moment that had begun with simple curiosity about a young artist's drawings was building towards something that could potentially change the trajectory of his entire artistic future. Dr. Vasquez stepped back from Jake's display and surveyed the crowd that had gathered around us. Her expression had shifted from professional interest to something approaching excitement, and I could sense that she was preparing to make an announcement that would surprise everyone present. The anticipation in the air was almost tangible. as people waited to see what had captured her attention so completely. She cleared her throat and addressed the crowd directly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to speaking. In galleries and lecture halls, she explained that in her 30 years of experience in the art world, she rarely encountered work that demonstrated such natural artistic instinct combined with emotional intelligence. Jake's drawings, she said, represented the kind of authentic artistic vision that couldn't be taught through conventional instruction, but emerged from an individual's unique way of seeing and interpreting the world. The crowd listened intently as Dr. Vasquez elaborated on the specific qualities that made Jake's work exceptional. She pointed out his ability to capture psychological depth in his subjects, his intuitive understanding of color as an emotional language, and his consistent focus on human dignity regardless of his subject's circumstances. These weren't accidental achievements, she explained, but evidence of a sophisticated artistic mind that was already operating at a level far beyond his chronological age. What happened next stunned everyone present, including me. Dr. Vasquez announced that she wanted to purchase Jake's portrait of Jerry for her personal collection. She explained that the drawing represented exactly the kind of work she had been seeking for a special exhibition she was planning, focused on contemporary artists who used their skills to document and celebrate overlooked members of society. Jake's portrayal of Jerry perfectly embodied the themes she wanted to explore. The silence that followed her announcement was profound. Parents who had been dismissive of Jake's work just hours earlier were now staring at his drawings with new understanding. Monica Sullivan's face had gone completely pale, and she was gripping Patricia's arm as if she needed physical support to remain standing. The reality that a distinguished art professional was offering to purchase work they had mocked was clearly difficult to process. Jake's reaction to Dr. Vasquez's offer was characteristically thoughtful. Rather than immediately accepting, he asked if he could discuss it with Jerry first. He explained that the portrait was about Jerry's story and his experiences, and he felt it was important to get Jerry's permission before allowing anyone else to own it. This response clearly impressed Dr. Vasquez even further, demonstrating that Jake's artistic integrity extended beyond technical skill to ethical considerations about representation and consent. Dr. Vasquez nodded approvingly at Jake's response and suggested they could arrange a meeting with Jerry to discuss the potential purchase. She mentioned that many galleries and collectors failed to consider the wishes of portrayed subjects, and Jake's instinct to seek Jerry's consent showed a maturity and respect that was remarkable in an artist of any age. This interaction was being witnessed by dozens of people, creating a powerful example of how art could be created and shared with dignity and mutual respect. The festival organizers were now fully engaged with the situation, developing around Jake's display. The festival director approached Dr. Vasquez to discuss the implications of her offer and to understand how this unexpected development might affect the official judging process. It was clear that Jake's recognition was transcending the normal parameters of the competition and creating something much more significant. Monica finally found her voice and approached Dr. Vasquez directly. Her tone was carefully controlled, but I could detect the strain beneath her polite demeanor as she asked what specifically made Jake's work worthy of professional attention. Dr. Vasquez's response was diplomatic but clear, explaining that authentic, artistic vision couldn't be manufactured through lessons or expensive materials, but emerged from an individual's unique perspective and emotional intelligence. The comparison between Jake's natural artistic development and Marcus's formal training became an impromptu teaching moment for everyone present. Dr. Vasquez explained that while technical instruction had its place in artistic education, it could sometimes interfere with the development of personal voice if applied too early or too rigidly. Jake's lack of formal training had actually protected his natural instincts and allowed his authentic vision to emerge without external influence. Other parents who had invested heavily in their children's artistic education were clearly grappling with the implications of Dr. Vasquez's comments. The assumption that professional instruction and expensive materials guaranteed artistic success was being challenged by Jake's recognition, forcing them to reconsider their approach to nurturing creativity in their children. Jake's response to all the attention remained remarkably grounded. When other children approached to ask about his drawing techniques, he answered their questions generously, sharing his approaches without any sense of superiority or competition. His willingness to help other young artists showed the same generosity of spirit that characterized his artwork, suggesting that his success hadn't changed his fundamental character. Dr. Vasquez's offer to purchase Jake's work was generating interest from other art professionals present at the festival. A gallery owner from Scottsdale mentioned that she would be interested in seeing more of Jake's work, and an art teacher from a prestigious private school asked about the possibility of arranging a studio visit. The networking opportunities that were spontaneously developing could have long-term implications for Jake's artistic development. The local media representatives were now actively documenting the story, recognizing that Jake's recognition represented more than just a feel-good moment at a community event. The photographer from the newspaper was capturing images of Jake discussing his work with Dr. Vasquez, while the arts blogger was interviewing other festival participants about their reactions to the unexpected development. Emma was beaming with pride as she watched her brother receive the recognition she had always believed he deserved. Her unwavering support throughout his artistic journey was receiving its own form of validation as she witnessed others finally seeing what she had always known about Jake's special abilities. Her confidence in her brother had never wavered, even when adult opinions suggested otherwise. The transformation in the festival atmosphere was complete. Jake's simple display had become the center of the most significant artistic discovery of the event, overshadowing the elaborate presentations that had initially dominated attention. The lesson about the difference between authentic artistic vision and superficial presentation was being demonstrated in real time for everyone present. Dr. Vasquez's interest in Jake's work extended beyond the immediate purchase offer. She mentioned the possibility of mentoring his artistic development, connecting him with appropriate educational resources, and potentially including his work in future exhibitions. These opportunities represented the kind of professional recognition that most artists worked years to achieve, and they were being offered to a 9-year-old based purely on the merit of his artistic vision. The ethical dimension of Jake's art was receiving particular attention from Dr. Vasquez and other professionals present. His consistent focus on portraying his subjects with dignity and respect, regardless of their social circumstances, demonstrated values that aligned with the highest traditions of humanistic art. This approach to his work suggested that his artistic development was being guided by moral principles as well as aesthetic instincts. Monica's discomfort with the situation was becoming more apparent as she realized that her investment in Marcus's artistic education had not produced the recognition she had expected. Her son's technically competent but emotionally empty landscape painting was being overshadowed by Jake's authentic and powerful portraits, challenging her assumptions about how artistic success should be achieved and measured. The crowd around Jake's display continued to grow as word spread throughout the festival about the remarkable young artist who was receiving professional recognition. People were abandoning other activities to witness what was being described as an unprecedented moment of artistic discovery at a community event. Jake's ability to articulate his artistic vision was impressing everyone who heard him speak. His explanations of his creative process, his motivations for choosing specific subjects, and his goals for his future artistic development showed a level of thoughtfulness and self-awareness that would be remarkable in an adult artist, let alone a 9-year-old child. Dr. Vasquez's examination of Jake's portfolio was revealing the consistency and development of his artistic vision over time. Each drawing demonstrated the same attention to human dignity, the same emotional intelligence, and the same technical instincts that made his work so compelling. This consistency suggested that his artistic approach was not accidental, but represented a coherent and developing artistic philosophy. The festival judges who had initially overlooked Jake's work were now participating in discussions about his artistic merits, perhaps reconsidering their evaluation criteria and judgment processes. The situation was creating a moment of professional reflection that could have implications for how young artists were recognized and supported in future events. The practical implications of Dr. Vasquez's offer were beginning to sink in for everyone present. The fact that a distinguished art professional was willing to purchase work by a 9-year-old artist was generating serious discussion about Jake's potential and the best ways to support his continued development while protecting his childhood and natural artistic instincts. Jake's response to the offer demonstrated wisdom beyond his years. Rather than being overwhelmed by the attention or becoming arrogant about his success, he remained focused on the human connections that had inspired his art. His concern for Jerry's feelings about the portrait sale showed that his success hadn't changed his fundamental values or his respect for the people who had trusted him to tell their stories. The networking opportunities that were developing around Jake's recognition could have significant long-term benefits for his artistic career. The connections he was making with art professionals, gallery owners, and potential mentors represented the kind of support system that could nurture his talent while protecting his natural development. Emma's role in supporting Jake's artistic journey was receiving recognition from the adults present. Several people commented on the importance of family support in nurturing young talent, and Emma's unwavering belief in her brother's abilities was being acknowledged as a crucial factor in his success. The story of Jake's recognition was clearly going to extend beyond the immediate festival context. The media documentation and professional interest he was generating would likely create opportunities for broader recognition and support for his artistic development. Dr. Vasquez's final comments to the crowd emphasized that Jake's success represented more than individual achievement, but demonstrated the importance of recognizing and supporting authentic artistic vision wherever it emerged. Her validation of his work was challenging conventional assumptions about artistic development and talent recognition, potentially influencing how other young artists would be evaluated and supported. As the festival day drew to a close, Jake carefully packed his drawings back into his portfolio, handling each piece with the same care and respect he had shown when setting up his display that morning. The recognition he had received hadn't changed his fundamental relationship with his art or his respect for the subjects he portrayed. The official award ceremony seemed almost anticlimactic after the professional recognition Jake had received throughout the day. While other children received ribbons and certificates, Jake had gained something far more valuable: validation from the professional art community and opportunities for continued development that most artists never experience. The drive home was quiet, with both Jake and Emma processing the events of the day in their own ways. Jake seemed more thoughtful than excited, perhaps beginning to understand the significance of what had happened and the possibilities it had created for his future. Emma chattered about how proud she was and how she had always known Jake was special. That evening, as I helped Jake organize his artwork and we discussed the day's events, I realized that our lives had been fundamentally changed by Dr. Vasquez's recognition of his talent. The opportunities that were now available to him would require careful navigation to ensure that his natural artistic development wasn't compromised by external pressures or expectations. The following weeks brought a series of developments that confirmed the significance of Jake's festival recognition. Dr. Vasquez arranged the meeting with Jerry, who was delighted to give his permission for the portrait sale and touched by Jake's consideration for his feelings. The purchase provided Jake with his first income as an artist, and Jerry with a sense of dignity and recognition that he hadn't experienced in years. Local media coverage of Jake's story generated interest from other art professionals and educational institutions. Invitations to participate in exhibitions, offers of mentorship, and inquiries about his artistic development created opportunities that we were still learning to evaluate and manage. Monica's reaction to Jake's success evolved over time from discomfort to grudging respect, and eventually to curiosity about how she might better support Marcus's genuine artistic interests rather than focusing on external validation. The lesson of Jake's recognition was influencing other parents' approaches to nurturing creativity in their children. The festival itself was changed by Jake's story, with organizers implementing new evaluation criteria that emphasized authentic, artistic vision alongside technical proficiency. Future events would be structured to better recognize and support young artists whose work demonstrated emotional intelligence and unique perspective. Jake's relationship with his art remained fundamentally unchanged despite the recognition and opportunities that followed. He continued to draw the people and subjects that interested him, maintaining the same respect for his subjects and the same focus on emotional truth that had initially attracted Dr. Vasquez's attention. The portrait of Jerry now hangs in Dr. Vasquez's home, where it serves as a reminder of the power of authentic artistic vision and the importance of recognizing talent wherever it emerges. Jerry visits occasionally to see his portrait and has become something of a mentor to Jake, sharing stories and perspectives that continue to inform his artistic development. The lesson of that festival day extends far beyond individual achievement or recognition. It demonstrates the importance of supporting authentic expression, recognizing talent in unexpected places, and maintaining respect for the human subjects who inspire artistic creation. Jake's success wasn't just about his individual abilities, but about the values and approach that guided his artistic practice. Looking back on that transformative day, I realized that the most important outcome wasn't the professional recognition or the opportunities that followed, but the validation of Jake's authentic artistic vision and the confirmation that supporting his unique perspective had been the right choice all along. The weeks following the festival brought changes to our lives that I could never have anticipated. Dr. Vasquez had indeed arranged the meeting with Jerry, and what unfolded during that encounter taught us all lessons about dignity, respect, and the profound impact that art can have on people's lives. Jerry lived in a small efficiency apartment downtown, a space he kept meticulously clean despite its modest furnishings and worn carpeting. When we arrived at Jerry's building, Jake carried his portfolio with the same careful attention he always showed his artwork. Emma held my hand tightly, uncertain about what to expect, but excited to meet the man her brother had drawn with such compassion. Jerry greeted us at his door wearing his cleanest shirt and a nervous smile, clearly moved that anyone would consider his opinion important enough to seek out. The conversation that followed revealed layers of Jerry's story that Jake had somehow intuited in his portrait but had never heard directly. Jerry spoke about his military service, his struggles with transitional challenges after discharge, and the series of circumstances that had led to his current situation. But he also talked about small acts of kindness from strangers, his hopes for reconnecting with his estranged daughter, and his appreciation for the way Jake had always treated him with genuine respect during their brief encounters at the grocery store. When Dr. Vasquez showed Jerry the portrait, his reaction was immediate and profound. Tears filled his eyes as he studied the way Jake had captured not just his physical appearance, but something deeper, something that spoke to his essential humanity despite his difficult circumstances. He traced the lines of the drawing with one finger, marveling at how Jake had seen qualities in him that he sometimes struggled to see in himself. Jerry's permission for the sale came with a condition that surprised everyone present. He wanted to write a letter to accompany the portrait, explaining his own story and his gratitude for being seen and portrayed with such dignity. Dr. Vasquez was delighted by this suggestion, explaining that the letter would add another dimension to the artwork and create a more complete narrative about the human connection that had inspired Jake's creation. The meeting with Jerry became a transformative experience for Jake as well. Hearing Jerry's full story gave him a deeper understanding of the experiences that had shaped the expression he had captured in his drawing. Jerry's gratitude for being portrayed with respect and dignity reinforced Jake's instinct that art could be a powerful way to honor and validate people who might otherwise feel invisible to society. Dr. Vasquez's purchase of the portrait was formalized with a ceremony that felt more significant than a simple financial transaction. She presented Jake with a check for $500, an amount that seemed enormous to a 9-year-old, but represented genuine recognition of his artwork's value in the professional art market. More importantly, she gave him a letter of recommendation that would open doors to opportunities we were still learning to understand. The local newspaper coverage of Jake's story generated responses from readers across the Phoenix area. Letters to the editor praised Jake's artistic vision and his respectful approach to portraying subjects who might otherwise be overlooked. Several readers mentioned being inspired by his example to look more carefully at the people around them and to consider how their own actions might contribute to creating a more compassionate community. Emma's role in supporting Jake's artistic journey was receiving recognition that surprised us all. The newspaper article mentioned her unwavering belief in her brother's abilities, and several readers commented on the importance of sibling support in nurturing creative development. Emma was proud to be acknowledged for her contributions, and her confidence in Jake's talent remained as strong as ever. Monica Sullivan's response to Jake's success evolved in ways that revealed her own capacity for growth and self-reflection. Initially defensive about her approach to Marcus's artistic education, she gradually began asking questions about how she might better support her son's genuine interests rather than focusing primarily on external validation and competition. Marcus himself seemed relieved by the shift in his mother's expectations. Without the pressure to produce work that would impress judges and other parents, he began exploring artistic subjects that genuinely interested him. His subsequent drawings showed more personality and authentic engagement, suggesting that removing external pressure had allowed his natural creativity to emerge more freely. The festival organizers implemented changes in their evaluation process based on the lessons learned from Jake's recognition. Future events would include judges specifically trained to recognize authentic artistic vision alongside technical proficiency, and evaluation criteria would explicitly include consideration of emotional resonance and personal expression, rather than focusing solely on conventional artistic standards. Dr. Vasquez's mentorship of Jake's artistic development proved to be carefully structured to protect his natural instincts while providing appropriate guidance and opportunities. She arranged for him to visit her university studio, where he could observe advanced art students working and ask questions about different techniques and approaches without feeling pressured to adopt specific methods. The studio visits revealed Jake's continued focus on portraiture and figure drawing, but also his growing interest in exploring different media and scales. Dr. Vasquez introduced him to charcoal, pastels, and watercolor techniques, always emphasizing that these were tools to enhance his existing vision rather than methods he needed to master to be considered a legitimate artist. Jake's artistic development continued to be guided by his interest in human subjects and his instinct to portray them with dignity and respect. His portfolio grew to include portraits of other neighborhood residents, fellow students at school, and family members, each drawing demonstrating the same emotional intelligence and authentic vision that had initially attracted professional attention. The financial aspect of Jake's artistic success required careful management to ensure that it enhanced rather than complicated his childhood experience. We established a savings account for his artwork earnings, with the understanding that the money would be available for his future artistic education or other goals he might develop as he grew older. Jerry's letter accompanying the portrait was eventually published in the newspaper, alongside a follow-up story about Jake's artistic development. Jerry's words about feeling seen and valued through Jake's artwork resonated with readers and generated additional discussion about how art could serve as a bridge between different segments of society. The relationship between Jake and Jerry continued to develop beyond the initial portrait transaction. Jerry began visiting our apartment occasionally, sharing stories about his experiences and observations that continued to inform Jake's understanding of human nature and social circumstances. These conversations became informal lessons in empathy and social awareness that complemented Jake's artistic education. Emma's artistic interests were also encouraged to develop, though her preferences ran toward abstract expression and color exploration rather than Jake's focus on representational portraiture. Dr. Vasquez's mentorship extended to include Emma, ensuring that both children had opportunities to explore their creative potential without feeling competitive pressure. The broader impact of Jake's recognition extended beyond our immediate family to influence how other parents in our community approach supporting their children's creative development. Several families began emphasizing authentic expression over technical achievement, creating a cultural shift that benefited many young artists. Monica's relationship with our family improved significantly as she processed the lessons of Jake's success. She began inviting us to family gatherings and community events, and her interactions with Jake showed genuine respect for his artistic vision rather than the condescension that had characterized her earlier behavior. The gallery exhibition featuring Jake's portrait of Jerry opened 6 months after the festival, generating significant attendance and media coverage. The exhibition's theme of contemporary artists documenting overlooked populations attracted visitors from across the Southwest, many of whom were particularly moved by Jake's contribution and Jerry's accompanying letter. Jake's behavior at the gallery opening demonstrated the same grounded character that had impressed everyone throughout his recognition process. He spent more time talking with visitors about Jerry's story than discussing his own artistic techniques, showing that his success hadn't changed his fundamental values or his focus on honoring his subjects. Jerry attended the gallery opening as an honored guest, wearing a new suit that Dr. Vasquez had helped him select for the occasion. His pride in being portrayed with dignity and respect was evident throughout the evening, and his conversations with other attendees helped them understand the human stories behind the artwork on display. The success of the exhibition led to additional opportunities for Jake's artistic development. Several other galleries expressed interest in his work, and art educators from regional institutions reached out to discuss potential programs or collaborations that might support his continued growth while protecting his natural development. Jake's school experience was also enhanced by his artistic recognition. Teachers who had previously viewed his drawing as a distraction began incorporating his interests into classroom activities, and his artwork was displayed prominently in school exhibitions and publications. The long-term impact of that festival day continued to unfold in ways that reinforced our decision to support Jake's authentic artistic vision, despite initial skepticism from others. His success demonstrated that genuine talent could be recognized and nurtured without compromising the values and character that made it meaningful. Dr. Vasquez's influence on Jake's development extended beyond artistic instruction to include lessons about the responsibility that comes with artistic ability. She emphasized that artists have opportunities to influence how people see and understand the world, and that this influence should be used thoughtfully and ethically. The portrait of Jerry hanging in Dr. Vasquez's home became a conversation starter for her many visitors, each of whom learned about Jake's story and the circumstances that had led to the artwork's creation. These conversations helped spread awareness about the importance of recognizing and supporting authentic artistic vision in young people. Jake's artistic practice continued to evolve while maintaining the core values that had initially distinguished his work. His subjects remained focused on human portraits, but his technical skills developed through practice and observation rather than formal instruction, preserving the authentic voice that made his art so compelling. The festival itself became an annual highlight in our family calendar, with Jake returning each year to display new work and connect with other young artists. His presence at the event served as inspiration for other children who might otherwise doubt the value of their own creative expression. Emma's artistic development flourished alongside Jake's, benefiting from the same supportive environment and access to mentorship opportunities. Her work in abstract expression and color theory provided interesting contrast to Jake's representational focus, demonstrating that authentic artistic vision could take many different forms. The financial success of Jake's artwork remained secondary to the personal satisfaction he derived from creating meaningful connections through his art. The money earned from sales was carefully managed to support his continued development without creating pressure to produce work primarily for commercial purposes. Jerry's ongoing presence in our lives enriched our entire family's understanding of resilience, dignity, and the importance of seeing beyond surface circumstances to recognize the essential humanity in every person. His friendship with Jake demonstrated that meaningful connections could develop across age and circumstance boundaries when approached with genuine respect and interest. The lessons learned from Jake's recognition influenced my own approach to parenting and professional life. The experience reinforced the importance of trusting instincts about children's abilities and supporting their authentic development, even when others might question unconventional choices. Monica's transformation from skeptical critic to supportive community member demonstrated that people could grow and change when confronted with evidence that challenged their assumptions. Her eventual friendship with our family showed that initial conflicts could be resolved through mutual respect and understanding. The broader cultural impact of Jake's story continued to generate discussion about how society recognizes and supports creative talent, particularly in young people whose abilities might not conform to conventional expectations or presentation methods. As Jake approached his 10th birthday, his artistic abilities continued to develop, while his character remained grounded in the same values that had initially attracted professional recognition. His success had enhanced rather than changed his fundamental approach to art and relationships. The anniversary of the festival became an opportunity for reflection on how much had changed in our lives, while acknowledging that the most important elements, Jake's artistic vision and family support, had remained constant throughout all the external developments. Looking back on that transformative day at the Desert Springs Art Festival, I realized that the most significant outcome wasn't the professional recognition or opportunities that followed, but the validation that supporting Jake's authentic artistic vision had been the right choice despite initial skepticism and criticism from others. The story of Jake's recognition continues to inspire other young artists and their families, demonstrating that genuine talent combined with authentic expression and strong character can overcome initial skepticism and create opportunities that seemed impossible when the journey began. The ripple effects of that October morning continued to expand in ways that transformed not just our family, but our entire community's understanding of how artistic talent emerges and deserves recognition. 2 years after the festival, Jake's reputation as a young artist had grown beyond Phoenix, attracting attention from art educators and gallery owners across the Southwest who were curious about the boy who had captured professional recognition through pure, authentic vision rather than formal training. Dr. Vasquez had become more than a mentor during this time, evolving into something approaching a family friend whose guidance extended beyond artistic instruction to include wisdom about navigating the art world while maintaining personal integrity. Her weekly visits to our apartment had become anticipated events where Jake could share his latest work and discuss his observations about the people and situations that continued to inspire his drawings. Jake's artistic practice had expanded to include larger-scale works and more complex compositions, but his fundamental approach remained unchanged. He still sought out subjects whose stories deserved telling, whose humanity might otherwise be overlooked by casual observers. His portfolio now included portraits of refugees at a local resettlement center, elderly residents at a nearby nursing home, and children with disabilities at Emma's school, who had become some of his most enthusiastic supporters. The nursing home project had emerged from a chance encounter during a visit to see my grandmother, who had recently moved into assisted living care. Jake had been sketching in the common area while I handled paperwork, and several residents had approached to see what he was drawing. Their curiosity had evolved into requests for portraits, and Jake had spent subsequent visits creating drawings that captured not just their current appearances, but hints of the vibrant lives they had lived. Each portrait told a story that went beyond surface details. Mrs. Henderson, a former opera singer whose voice had been silenced by age and illness, was portrayed with her eyes closed and a subtle smile that suggested she could still hear music that others couldn't perceive. Mr. Garcia, a retired carpenter whose hands were now gnarled with arthritis, was drawn with his fingers positioned as if still feeling the grain of wood he had shaped for decades. The nursing home staff had been so moved by Jake's portraits that they had arranged for them to be displayed in the facility's main hallway, creating an impromptu gallery that celebrated the residents' dignity and individual histories. Family. Members visiting their loved ones often stopped to study the drawings, many commenting that Jake had captured qualities they recognized but had never seen portrayed so clearly. This project had attracted the attention of a documentary filmmaker who was creating a piece about intergenerational connections and the role of art in preserving human stories. Jake's work with the nursing home residents became a central element of the film, which went on to win awards at several regional film festivals and brought national attention to his unique artistic approach. The documentary's success led to invitations for Jake to speak at conferences about art therapy and community engagement, experiences that further developed his ability to articulate his artistic philosophy while remaining humble about his achievements. His presentations, often accompanied by Emma, who had become his most trusted companion at public events, emphasized the importance of seeing every person as worthy of attention and respect. Emma's own artistic development had flourished during this period, her abstract work gaining recognition in its own right through school exhibitions and community art shows. Her paintings explored color relationships and emotional expression in ways that complemented Jake's representational focus, and their collaborative pieces had become some of their most compelling work. The collaborative works between Jake and Emma represented a unique artistic dialogue between siblings whose different approaches to visual expression created something neither could achieve alone. Jake would create detailed portraits, while Emma would surround them with abstract color fields that seemed to emanate from the emotional center of the representational work, creating pieces that operated on multiple levels of meaning and impact. Dr. Vasquez had begun including these collaborative pieces in her university's student exhibitions, where they generated discussion about the nature of artistic collaboration and the ways that different approaches to expression could enhance, rather than compete with each other. Art students were particularly intrigued by how two young artists could create such sophisticated conceptual work without formal training in collaborative techniques. The success of Jake's work had also influenced the broader Phoenix art community's approach to recognizing and supporting young artists. Several galleries had established programs specifically designed to identify and nurture authentic artistic vision in children, using Jake's story as a model for how genuine talent could be supported without being compromised by premature commercialization or academic pressure. Monica Sullivan had become one of the most vocal advocates for these new approaches to youth art education. Her transformation from skeptical competitor to supportive community member had been gradual but profound, influenced by watching how Jake's success had been built on authentic expression rather than external validation. Marcus had benefited from his mother's changed perspective, developing his own artistic voice free from the pressure to compete or conform to conventional expectations. The relationship between Marcus and Jake had evolved into genuine friendship based on shared artistic interests rather than competition. Marcus's work had developed in directions that reflected his own personality and observations, focusing on urban landscapes and architectural details that showed his interest in the built environment, rather than the human subjects that fascinated Jake. Jerry's role in our extended family had solidified over time, his regular visits becoming occasions for storytelling and shared meals that enriched everyone's understanding of resilience and community. His friendship with Jake had deepened through their continued conversations about art, life experience, and the importance of treating every person with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. The portrait that Dr. Vasquez had purchased continued to generate interest and discussion in her home, where it had become a focal point for conversations about the power of art to bridge social divides and create empathy between people from different backgrounds. Visitors often asked about the story behind the painting, leading to discussions about Jake's artistic development and Jerry's ongoing friendship with our family. Jerry's own life had stabilized significantly during the years following his portraits. Creation. The recognition and respect he had received through Jake's artwork had contributed to his confidence in seeking assistance with housing and employment. and he had eventually found steady work as a maintenance supervisor at a local community center. His transformation demonstrated how being seen and valued could contribute to positive changes in a person's life circumstances. The community center where Jerry worked had become another source of artistic inspiration for Jake, whose portraits of the diverse populations served by the facility had helped document the organization's impact on neighborhood residents. These drawings had been used in grant applications and fundraising materials, demonstrating how art could serve practical purposes while maintaining its essential function of honoring human dignity. Jake's high school years were approaching, and the question of how to continue supporting his artistic development while ensuring a well-rounded education had become an important consideration. Dr. Vasquez had recommended several specialized programs that could nurture his talents without overwhelming him with academic pressure or compromising his authentic artistic voice. The decision-making process about Jake's future education had involved extensive consultation with educators, art professionals, and Jake himself, who had clear ideas about wanting to continue his focus on portraiture and community engagement, rather than pursuing more abstract or commercially oriented artistic directions. His maturity in articulating his goals had impressed everyone involved in the planning process. Emma's future educational path was also being carefully considered, with her abstract artistic abilities being balanced against her interests in science and mathematics. Her teachers had noted her exceptional ability to visualize complex mathematical relationships through her artistic work, suggesting potential connections between her creative and analytical abilities that could influence her future academic choices. The documentary about Jake's work had continuing impact through its distribution to educational institutions and community organizations interested in models for supporting young artists. The film had been translated into several languages and was being used internationally to demonstrate how authentic artistic vision could be recognized and nurtured regardless of economic or social circumstances. The broader implications of Jake's story continued to influence discussions about art education, talent recognition, and the importance of supporting authentic expression in young people. His success had become a case study used in university programs training future art educators and community organization staff members working with youth development. The annual festival had evolved to include a special category for authentic artistic vision, with judging criteria that emphasized emotional resonance and personal expression alongside technical proficiency. Jake served as a youth ambassador for this category, helping to identify and encourage other young artists whose work demonstrated similar qualities of genuine observation and respectful portrayal of their subjects. The mentorship program that had grown out of Jake's experience with Dr. Vasquez had expanded to include other young artists who were being paired with professional artists and educators committed to supporting authentic development rather than imposing conventional expectations or commercial pressures. Jake's artistic philosophy had crystallized during these years into a clear understanding that art's highest purpose was to create connections between people and to honor the dignity inherent in every human being. His work continued to reflect this philosophy through his choice of subjects and his approach to portrayal, maintaining the respectful attention to individual humanity that had initially attracted professional recognition. The financial aspects of Jake's artistic success had been carefully managed to support his continued development, without creating pressure to produce work primarily for commercial purposes. The income from his artwork had been invested in educational opportunities, art supplies, and community programs that aligned with his values and interests. The relationship between our family and Dr. Vasquez had evolved into something approaching extended family, with her guidance and support extending beyond artistic instruction to include life advice and emotional support during challenging periods. Her presence in our lives had provided stability and wisdom that had been crucial during Jake's transition from childhood recognition to more serious artistic development. The impact of Jake's work on the subjects he portrayed had become an important aspect of his artistic practice. Many of the people he had drawn had reported feeling more confident and valued after seeing themselves portrayed with such care and respect, demonstrating how art could serve therapeutic and empowering functions beyond its aesthetic value. The collaborative relationship between Jake and the communities he portrayed had developed protocols for ensuring that subjects felt comfortable with how they were represented and had input into how their portraits were used or displayed. This approach had become a model for other artists working with vulnerable populations, emphasizing the importance of consent and dignity in artistic representation. Looking toward the future, Jake's artistic goals remained focused on using his abilities to document and celebrate human diversity while continuing to develop his technical skills in service of his fundamental vision. His plans included potentially studying art therapy or community development, fields that would allow him to combine his artistic abilities with his commitment to social engagement. The legacy of that October morning at the Desert Springs Art Festival had extended far beyond individual recognition to influence how an entire community understood and supported young artists. The lessons learned from Jake's experience had created lasting changes in educational approaches, community programs, and family dynamics that would benefit future generations of creative young people. The story of Jake's recognition had become part of local folklore, told and retold as an example of how authentic talent could overcome initial skepticism and how treating others with dignity and respect could create unexpected opportunities for connection and growth. The tale served as inspiration for other families facing similar challenges in supporting their children's unconventional talents or interests. As Jake approached his teenage years, the foundation established during his early recognition continued to support his development while protecting the essential qualities that had made his work so compelling. His character remained grounded in the same values of empathy, respect, and authentic expression that had initially attracted professional attention, suggesting that success had enhanced rather than compromised his fundamental nature. The ongoing friendship between Jake and Jerry served as a reminder of how art could create meaningful connections across social boundaries and how treating others with dignity could lead to relationships that enriched everyone involved. Their continued collaboration on community projects demonstrated the lasting impact of that initial portrait and the values it represented. The transformation of our family's life through Jake's artistic recognition had taught us all lessons about the importance of supporting authentic expression, maintaining personal values despite external pressures, and recognizing that success, measured by impact on others, was more meaningful than recognition measured by conventional standards. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.